Joe Biden, well, apart from the fact that the mask is well and truly off and has been for some time about just how radical his administration is going to be, there's plenty of stories in and around his son, a lady who's working on a very book about the laptop from hell, about Hunter Biden, and we'll get to that in a second, but also is an absolute rock star at the New York Post. You see her with all the primetime guys at Fox, and she's slumming it with me tonight. None other than the great Miranda Devine in New York. Thank you so much for having a chat, mate.
Hi, Paul. Great to see you.
And you. Now, before we get to anything else, let's jump into the border issues right now. There are literally thousands of illegal immigrants that are coming up through South and Central America. They're getting to the border, and if they can, they try to cross it, or literally, as we have seen, kids are being thrown over the border because Biden and Harris have made it very clear. If you can get there, you will be welcome.
Yes, well, I mean, that's very familiar to Australia, this situation here. It's what the Indonesians once said to the Australian government. Biden and Harris have put the sugar on the table. They've allowed the people smugglers to just have a bonanza. They're charging these poor people tens of thousands of dollars to make that very dangerous border crossing come up from Honduras and Guatemala and elsewhere. And they've said, Joe Biden basically said, if it's a child, they come in because we're so humane and compassionate. And there's absolutely nothing humane and compassionate about what's happening now. Every adult that you see alighting from these buses to go to these detention centres has a child with them, just one child aged between about 2 and 8. There's no evidence that the child is even related to that adult. God knows what's been happening. And the children are also just unaccompanied, as you said. There was a 3 and 4 year old girl, sisters, just thrown or dropped over the border. I think it's something like 14 feet or 4 metres. They were just dropped there at night and left there to their own devices, and were caught on infrared camera and of course picked up and taken to the hospital by Americans. But it's there's just such an incentive for people smugglers to ply their trade, and there's so many children coming across the border that border agents are overwhelmed. They're basically doing childcare instead of guarding the border, which just means that drugs and weapons and whatever other things that the cartels want to bring across the border, they're doing with impunity. And as well, lots of criminals who previously might have been deported from America are coming across those gaps, because the other thing that Joe Biden did was stop the building of the wall, which where it's complete has been very effective. So it's all about unwinding Donald Trump's policies, and the result is an absolute disaster, and the administration just has their head in the sand. The woman who they appointed in charge, Roberta Jacobson, as the sort of border boss, she's just resigned, and they've pretended that it's because she only ever intended to stay for the first 100 days anyway. It's a complete schmozzle, and Joe Biden's appointed Kamala Harris to be the point woman for the border, and she's just doing whatever she can to stay far away from it.
Well, because, I mean, we know what a touch point this is, how important this is, but also it's kind of hard to explain to Australians, but it's important that we try, which is in Australia, left and right have a very clear concept of what legal and illegal immigration is, right? But the left in the United States will not use the term illegal immigration, and they deliberately just keep saying immigration, migration, to try to absolutely blur the lines between those who have gone through the rigorous process to get to America and those that are doing exactly what we're talking about here. And that in part is the fog that Harris and Biden are able to hide behind here, which is that it's just migration without the paperwork here, as opposed to, well, you either have a border, which means you need the papers to get through, or you don't have a border and it's a free-for-all.
Yes, and even worse, they're trying to push through legislation. I mean, they control Congress, so they probably will, which gives illegal aliens the vote. And also they're trying to ensure that voter identification is not required. Various states are trying to tighten up voter ID, like Georgia, and that's been talked about by Joe Biden as well as all the other Democrats and activists as racist. They're calling it, a vestige of the Jim Crow South, which is the worst type of segregation and racism from the past.
Right.
And in addition, they're providing free health care to illegal immigrants, and New York is even giving, I think it was something like $30,000 cash bonuses to illegal migrants. So it's a deliberate incentive to illegal migrants, and they pretend it isn't. But there are a lot of people who speculate that it's the Democrats are doing this deliberately to create more voters. Some of these people down south are wearing Joe Biden T-shirts, and you create more voters. You turn, say, a state like Texas, which is on the border and which has 38 electoral votes. It could swing an election,
well, that's it.
And that currently is solidly Republican. But you turn that Democrat, and you win elections. And really, it seems to me that the Democrats, they know they only have a couple of years to cement their power, and what they're doing, their priority seems to be to ensure that they are in power in perpetuity. They're just about to stack the Supreme Court. They want to make DC a state, which would of course be more Democrats, and upend the Electoral College. They're just every which way they're coming at it, and also to try and cement those COVID-specific special dispensations in the last election, which favoured Democrats so much. They want to make those permanent, and if you oppose that, if you just try and get it back to what it used to be, and maybe with a bit more, make it a bit easier for people to vote by extending absentee voting and extend the period of time that people are allowed to vote, that's still regarded as racist. And in Georgia, in fact, Coca-Cola and various other companies have boycotted. The Major League Baseball has left Georgia because they're saying that their new voter reforms are racist. They're not at all. They just make it harder to cheat and easier to vote.
Yeah, and the photo ID that you need to get tickets to Major League Baseball is what we're talking about the ability to absentee vote. It's just, I don't...
Absolutely.
Look, it's great. Grist for the mill, lovely things to talk about, but horrible things happening to a beautiful country. Miranda, thank you so much. I love seeing you in full fright. You're kicking ass. It's awesome to see. All the best to you, Miranda.
Thanks, Paul.